Hello, Internet. So this video is going to be separate from my regular vlogs because I was tagged to participate in the My Writing Process blog tour. You can check it out at #MyWritingProcess on Twitter to read how a variety of other writers out there survive and thrive and struggle with their own creative process. First, I want to thank my sister, Darian Lindell, for tagging me for the blog tour. I have read or stage managed or co-written most, if not all, of my sister's work, and with her talent, she can do anything with words, and I can only strive to imitate her. I've been writing since I was really young. I've found stuff that was written in crayon, so it's been a long time. Mostly it was poetry at first, because probably it was short, and I didn't have much of an attention span, I think, at 4 or 5. And it wasn't till middle school and high school that I started to write actual longer pieces. I really had a hard time finishing my longer pieces because I would get distracted or busy or bored. Or if I did finish them, I would never show them to anyone because I didn't have any confidence. That seems to be a recurring theme. It wasn't until my sister convinced me to write a book with her that I actually considered writing something and actually showing it to people. So thanks for that too, Darian. What am I working on? Well, I have 3 projects in the works right now. A paranormal romance series that I'm writing with my sister under the name Lola Davis. I'm also working on a sci-fi thriller based on a crazy drunken dream that I had a few years ago. And I've been picking away at that for a little while. And then the third one is a fantasy novel that is kind of still in the idea phase. I'm still pondering how to make it work and what the plot would be. So I've been doing a lot of writing recently, not just on my book with my sister and these other 2 projects, but I'm also a grad student at Signum University, where I will be getting my master's in fantasy literature. As if I wasn't a big enough dork already. I get to study the worlds of Tolkien and J.K. Rowling and Neil Gaiman and Sir Arthur Conan Doyle and many, many more for credit. And I will actually be able to earn a real degree in fantasy literature, which, by the way, is awesome. Awesome. It's possibly the best money I've ever spent. Why do I write what I write? I love the idea of building a new world, figuring out the rules and the differences and how it would impact the world, and the ability to create a world from scratch is intoxicating. Whether I'm writing an essay expounding the merits of Sherlock Holmes, or a dirty limerick, or a Greek myth-inspired vampire romance novel, it's the world that I am building that inspires me to continue. If I'm not interested in the world I'm creating, I'm not going to stick with it. Because those are always the stories that I'm drawn to the most when I'm reading. Whether it's a world in a comic book, or a Jane Austen novel, or a Neil Gaiman, crazy world, or even Star Trek. That's what I want to read, so that's what I want to write. How does my work differ from others of its genre? I guess it's the same way that I'm different from other writers in the genre. I am my own person, and I'm rather strange at that. And I bring that to my writing. It tends to have a darker, quirkier side, kind of like me. But I've read, watched, played in nearly every genre It doesn't make me an expert, but it definitely helps me broaden my characters and my influence and my breadth of knowledge in creating my own worlds. How does my writing process work? I can't say that I have a consistent writing process. I like to keep it changeable because otherwise I will get bored, which means that I can be lazy and stop working on whatever project it is that I'm finding boring. Every story starts in the same way for me. Most of my ideas come from some crazy, vivid dreams that I have, or sometimes daydreams. And I gotta say, my imagination and my head is big bag of weird, but it's a powerful thing. Sometimes my dreams are so vivid, I can smell, I can taste, everything is in technicolor, and it's like I'm watching a film inside my head. So I jot down whatever comes out. And sometimes I keep it, and sometimes I don't, and sometimes I feed it into stories I'm already writing, and sometimes it becomes a story all its own. And then I set it aside for a while because sometimes or something will hit me. Or I'll have the same dream again, but it'll continue. It'll go further. It'll go farther. And then when I feel like I have enough inspiration and enough ideas and enough background for the story, that's when I pick it back up. And I just put my fingers to the keyboard, and most of the time I have no idea what is going to come out of my head, what I'm going to write, or where the story is going until it's streaming out of my fingers. And for me, that's the easiest part. It's the pre-work, the thinking, the coming up with an idea, the times when I get stuck. Those are the hard part. But the actual writing seems to come pretty easily, and I feel that I'm lucky for that. My life is busy. I have a full-time job, I'm in grad school, I write as much as I can, I have my new YouTube channel, I'm video editing side projects like weddings. Sorry, Sarah, I'm still working on it. I'm kind of like a third parent to my sister's twins. I'm with them, nearly every day. And if I'm going to write something, it has to be special. It has to be something that I'm passionate about. It has to be something worth writing. That means I may not pick up these ideas for weeks or months or years. I've had stories for 10, 15 years that I haven't picked up just because it hasn't been the right time, or I don't have the inspiration. But I never get rid of anything. I have 7 or 8 partial stories or ideas in my to-do writing file, and at any time I could pick up one of them and start where I left off. I usually start writing the plot, writing down the actions, figuring out the progression of the story as it plays out in my head, and I hash out a good part of the story this way, and then I just go back and I flush out the details. I try to write chronologically, but that doesn't always work, especially when I get stuck. Sometimes I'll get to a scene that I'm not excited about or that I know has to happen, but there's too much meat in it and I don't want to have to figure things out, so I'll just skip it. I'll put a pin in it and I'll move on. I'll get to it eventually because I know it has to be written, but for the most part I'll just move on to something past the meat to get to the action. I try really hard not to revise while I'm writing. It doesn't always work because when you get stuck, sometimes it's best to go back and make sure you figured everything out and you haven't written yourself into a corner. I know that if I give myself mini deadlines, making sure I have beta readers set up and giving them a date that I'm going to send it out really helps me get in gear and, prioritize things so that I can get the work done. The hardest part about my writing process is getting feedback. I'm always terrified, and it's always better than I imagine it to be, but I'm always terrified. But I try to take a break. Sometimes it'll be a week. since a break for me means only dropping one of the 8 balls that I've got going on in the air, uh, it's hard. That's my writing process. Next, I'm inviting you to meet some awesome writer friends of mine and read about their writing processes. First up is Joann Varnell. Joann has been a valued critique partner for the last year and a half. She lives in Tacoma with her husband and 2 kids. You can visit her blog online. The address is right below. Or you can find her on Twitter. And I've put a link to her Twitter down below as well. Next is Paul Mullin. He is a Seattle writer. He he describes himself as a recovering playwright. And you can visit his blog at paulmullin.org. It's called Just Rot. And I'll put a link to it down below. Or you can follow him on Twitter, and I'll put his address down below. So again, I'd like to thank my sister for tagging me in my writing process blog tour. See you soon.